Joe Pardavila. This is the Forbes Books Podcast, and the Oxford Dictionary defines disruption as radical change to an existing industry or market due to technological innovation. Now, the word disruption gets thrown around a lot these days, mostly in tech circles. But how do you disrupt an industry that's been around since the 19th century? That's what my guest, Rebekah Borucki, is doing with Row House Publishing. Her team is on a mission to support diverse communities and disrupt the book publishing industry. Rebekah, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Every once in a while, I'll start a podcast by asking this question, sort of like the entrepreneur's conundrum. See the problem, fix the problem. So What problem did you see and try to fix with Row House?
Publishing being so white. That's what it was. Yeah.
Is that a hashtag, publishing so white?
I mean, let's do it, right? It probably is, but if it's not, let's start it right now. No, publishing was extraordinarily white. So white, it was glaring. I was, an author at a mind, body, spiritual imprint for about 5 years. And I was at a conference in 2018. I looked around at 100 people in the room. I'm biracial because this is not a visual medium.
Yeah.
So I'm very light complected, right? So if I say that I'm the brownest person in the room, that's a problem. And I asked the president, the CEO, why that was. And his answer was, because you need to understand, Rebekah, that we cater to an affluent audience. So yeah. So,
which is code word, I guess, for just rich white people, right?
Very thinly veiled code word. Yeah.
I guess it wasn't too thin, but yeah, I get it.
Right. So I stayed there for a couple of years trying to remedy that issue from the inside, and realizing that if it's not, in the interest of the leadership, then it's not something that they're going to invest a lot of energy or money into. And I got the invitation from a friend in October 2020 to start my own thing, and I naively said, yeah, why not? And here we are.
And up until that point, did you have any sort of entrepreneurial ventures? Because I know you've done a ton of stuff, but did you have anything that you were some like from the ground up that you had sort of birthed and given, or was this your first?
So I got into writing because I had an online wellness platform that focused on meditation and anti-anxiety tools. So I had been doing that since 2009. So yeah, I was an entrepreneur, but it was definitely a one-woman show. Nothing like this, nothing like running a publishing house, but it gave me a little bit of confidence to think that I could do it. Talk
about that confidence, because like you mentioned, it's the white publishing was so white. So here comes Rebekah Borucki. What kind of challenges did you have to initially sort of tackle when you started this?
I think the biggest challenge is when it came when we were trying to get money and going the traditional route, the traditional venture capitalist route, having to answer the question, why this is necessary. Why do Black and brown people need to be paid more? Answering not, how are we going to make money, but how are we not going to fail? So that was really challenging. And that's what led us to go the crowdfunding route. And I'm probably getting a little bit ahead of myself, but that's what it was. It was just, the desire was there, the audience is there, the authors are there, but the money just isn't. I mean, and I think that anyone knows, who knows anything about fundraising knows that, for women, it's extraordinarily hard, but then women of color, the funding's almost non-existent. So that was a big hurdle.
Yeah, one of the things I've been experiencing over the last couple of years, speaking to female entrepreneurs, is the idea of like when people used to walk into offices, people don't do that anymore, but when walking into like a boardroom of investors, and it was typically all white gentlemen. And so if it was a female-centric product, fill in the blank, whatever it is, and if that guy didn't have like a daughter, it was like looking at like paint dry. Like they had no idea what was happening in the room. It was that sort of the challenges that you were seeing, that basically you were trying to address this issue that was for Black and brown people, but you were walking into a room of just white people who didn't get the problem.
Yeah, I mean, white cis het men, cisgender heterosexual men, because we're also publishing books by and for queer folks, by and for disabled people. And if they don't have that personal experience, there's really not that attachment or that desire to really bring those stories forward. So yeah, it was incredibly challenging because again, they just didn't see the point. And also, publishing is just a really old industry that resists change in every way.
Yeah.
So just getting them to grasp the idea that, we wanted to pay people more and we wanted these equitable, transparent contracts was, it was really, really tough, and it's still tough. And I think that we're, getting some blowback. We're building some resentment from other publishers because we're being so transparent with our process and how we pay people.
Yeah, that is a funny sort of dark secret about the publishing world. Like it's very much like the music industry, like in the 50s, where it's like no one, like who's getting the money, who's getting royalties. So how do you make that transparency a sort of a calling card and make it something that attracts authors who typically would want to be chasing one of these, establishment publishers?
Sure. So we have something called the 40-40 model. It is in tribute to 40 Acres and a Mule, a promise that was given to Black Americans and then taken back. So we offer every single author, regardless of the size of their platform, a $40,000 advance. And then on the other side, a 40% royalty share, which is about 4 times industry average. Industry average is 10%. We talk about it very openly. Our contracts are standard, so authors are absolutely able to have agents. We welcome agents, but there's not much for them to do. But yeah, that's what we're offering, and I think that that's what's upsetting a few people, and we're glad.
Talk about you mentioned the crowdfunding. How was the initial response to that?
Well, we're very lucky, and I'll say that I hold a lot of platform privilege. So I'm very lucky to have a large Instagram platform, a large Facebook platform, and a lot of friends who also have that. And we just launched in February of 2021. We called all our friends, DM'd all our friends and said, look, we're trying to flood the feed for the last week of February. Just tell everybody about Row House. We want to get the attention of investors and just anyone who will listen. And they showed up. They showed up in the millions, in the millions, in terms of their audience numbers, and shared what we were doing. We quickly grew our Instagram. I think now we're over 20,000, maybe 21,000 in that short time. And this is a publisher, so we have to look at these numbers like we are doing nerds work, right? Like we're not rock stars, we're not supermodels. So people just got really, really excited about our message, what we're doing. That encouraged us. And then the money started to flow. We raised $222,000 on our own. Wow. And then we teamed up with a Black and Brown funded and founded equity crowdfunding platform called Seat at the Table. And they took us all the way to, I think we're almost at 1.2 million, but we got to 1.1 million in less than 10 months.
That's unbelievable. And tell me about Seat at the Table. I know it's not the focus of our conversation here, but it's when doing research on you before the conversation, I ran into this. I'm like, because I'd heard about the fact that you crowdfunded, so me sillily assumed it was like an Indiegogo or something like that. But what are the differences, and what does the Seat at the Table offer you guys?
For one, they're just aligned in our values. Black and Brown funded and founded is extremely rare in equity crowdfunding. And it's really important for us not to just have, the Black and Brown disabled queer faces up front as our authors. And that's what so many publishers are doing, especially since, the 2020 uprisings and Black Lives Matter. They're just putting these faces out front and kind of tokenizing them, using them. We wanted everyone involved with our company, from fundraising to accounting to our legal team to our social media team, to really represent the mission. So we found Pierre Laveau from Seat at the Table. He's one of the founders. He was just so down for our mission. He spoke our language. They took so much weight off of us in terms of, dealing with the paperwork and the legal stuff and the Securities and Exchange Commission. Oh my gosh, I got such an education. I said, by the end of this, I'm like a finance bro.
I was going to say, you got an MBA here, yeah.
Totally, probably better. Because MBAs, I don't know if they're worth much these days, but we so we hooked up with them, and it's just been a beautiful experience. And I've actually personally invested in other companies that they have represented there, and it's just it's been really cool.
That is awesome. That's and it's great to share for folks who are not familiar with Seat at the Table. That's really cool. And then once you started gaining this momentum, were VCs finally like, oh, wait a minute, this sounds like a good idea. Maybe we should. Did that help?
That's the story of my life, right? Like, when I was with my old publisher, and what really started all of this of me, going indie, was that I presented my children's book to them. I had already published 2 books and they weren't interested. But then, K-12, which is the largest online learning platform, charter school, they picked up one of my books for licensing. So they're distributing to, 20,000 second graders across the United States. And then all of a sudden the publisher was like, all right, let's look at this and maybe we can give you a contract, which is fine. I mean, they're about the business, but yeah, then we started getting some bigger attention. But truthfully, all my gratitude goes out to the over 1,100 investors and donors that showed up with $5, $20, up to $100,000. We did have one of those that just really believe in us and want to be part of the community. We didn't, we had conversations with the folks with more money, but we did turn some away because we felt like they were trying to use us as kind of like a credibility badge that they were doing the anti-racist thing. Yeah.
It's one of the things that came up through the social uprising of 2020. And I hope a lot of people recognize this as well as, everyone and their mother plastered, Black Lives Matter on everything, on their buildings, in their offices, on their websites. And I'm like, that's great, but look inside of you. Like, are you hiring Black and brown people? Are you hiring queer people? That's where, as nice as I'm sure for folks to see that they are supporting Black Lives Matter, that support means nothing unless you're doing it internally. Have you seen that shift where it's not just a superficial support mechanism? And you were just talking about it. You saw people, you saw through it, but are you seeing companies being able to now embrace that internally?
I want to be fair, but no.
Yeah.
We have an incredible DEI consultant, Trudy LeBron, who wrote what I am calling the business book of 2022, the anti-racist business book, really stands up to its name. I talked to her, I talked to other DEI consultants, and it's really just a box that they're checking.
Yeah.
They're hiring the folks, but are they willing to, and here's the big part, are they willing to give something up to make their company better? Because in the beginning, it really is about who are we, or how are we going to step aside, or what are we willing to give up in terms of, pay so we can distribute it, more widely among, people that aren't in the C-suite. That's not happening. And, for me, I had a choice. I was able to leave. I had the financial ability to say goodbye, even though, I have 5 children. It was not the easiest thing. I have, children in college, one getting married this year. It wasn't so much fun giving up those contracts, but I was able to do it. And, choice is a privilege. And I see a lot of people with the privilege of choice not making, I will say, the right choice and really changing their companies from within. So that's why I think that it really takes kind of tearing it down and building something new.
Yeah. And you talked about the fact that you are disrupting the publishing business and that the people in the publishing business are not fans of this disruption. Of all the things you're doing, what do you think they are least fond of what you're attempting at Roa? I'm just curious.
It's the transparent contract.
Yeah.
It's the transparent contract. And also just that flat advance of $40,000. They're definitely giving out, 6-figure advances, but that means that so many of their authors get zero, right? Or they just get a couple grand. And then that 40% royalty share, they're like, we've been challenged so many times. A veteran who's now become kind of the godmother of Row House. I'm just going to say her name, Cindy Spiegel from Spiegel and Grau. She's amazing. She's amazing. She's a mentor. But in the beginning, she's like, look, I don't just think that you're ambitious. I think this is impossible. And she's changed her tune since then. But I will say there have been a couple champions. Dennis Ulau, the COO, the CFO of Simon & Schuster, who was a colleague of my partner, Kristen McGinnis. He stepped up and helped us with our plan. He introduced us to the folks at Simon & Schuster that gave us a great sales and distribution partnership deal. So there have been people that have stepped up and championed us. And I think it's because so many people that get into publishing, and I'll say this, it's probably the same in politics and a lot of other industries, they get in with these ideals and wanting to change things and wanting to tell stories, but they get caught up in the machine and they don't know how to change it. But, for Black and brown folks, and, this is the way that we've survived. Right. So this idea of community and lifting each other up. So what comes very natural, I think, to our communities, that's something that's in our culture. It's very exciting to bring into business.
Yeah. And if we could peel the curtain away a little bit, you have obviously an extensive career in publishing. For folks who are not involved in publishing or don't know how it works, I'm always curious as to how these publishing companies make money. Like, you walk into a bookstore, there's like 500,000 copies of James Patterson just sitting there, or like, or like the latest celebrity book there, and no one's buying these things. Obviously someone is, but they're just collecting dust. How do publishing companies make money?
Okay, so I don't have an extensive career and I'm learning a lot too, but I'll say this, and which was very easy to figure out, is that a lot of it's a gamble. So they have their couple hits that are paying for all the non-hits. And what we're doing at Row House is just being a lot more discerning. We're really partnering with every single one of the authors. We hire fantastic publicity. We have Kima Jones from Jack Jones Literary Arts, who's working on several of our titles, and Kelly Taylor. They're just doing the real hard work. This isn't something that's common in publishing. They're not putting up the money to market their books. We're just being very careful with how we spend our money. We want to be good stewards with our investors' money and with our authors' careers. I have a huge sense of responsibility when it comes to these folks and their books.
Yeah, I guess, the publishing industry, it's sort of like the robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's like we got J.K.
Absolutely.
Rowling. J.K. Rowling's going to write.
Oh, her. Yeah.
She's going to sell 100 million. I know it's probably the worst case to probably bring up here, but I'm just saying she's the biggest name. I know it's a loaded name these days, but the fact that selling 100 million copies of Potter will then obviously let them give all these large advances to these other authors. I get it now, but it's still shocking to me. As much as I love going to a library or bookstore, I guess more so a bookstore when it comes to purchasing, but the idea that all these books are sitting here and no one's buying, I'm like, I don't understand how these people.
I don't know how bookstores make money. I'll say that. I will raise my hand and say, I don't know how bookstores make money. And, it could be coming from an altruistic place. They can say, look, we can give more deals to more unknowns. But the problem is that when they contract with these unknowns, they're not giving them advances. So folks that are already not making money off their art or their craft, they're sitting there like, where do I find time to write this book? And then now I have no advance to even market this book or get the launch page or hire the team. So it's like this self-fulfilling catch-22, you just can't, it's almost like they're doomed before they even start. So we're really trying to give everybody exactly what they need. A lot of our authors do not need the $40,000 advance. They can go anywhere and get 10 times that. We're so privileged that they have, signed with us, but that 40% royalty on the back end is something that they're looking at.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, you making art and getting it out there. What's the politics like of getting Row House publishing books on the shelves of these major bookstores, whether it's online or on the shelves, or featured in front of the store? Is there some sort of politics in play there?
There's a tremendous amount of politics, and I'll say that that's where the old machine comes in handy. Partnering with Simon & Schuster for sales and distribution, partnering with Orange Sky Audio for all of our audiobooks. And them giving us very beautiful deals in honor of what we're trying to do. Put more justice into these contracts. There's no way I can get into Barnes & Noble as a brand new indie. So we really need those sales teams, and that's a great privilege for us. And I'm just hoping that we can continue to do this for, other indies, give them that ticket in, because they're still, as much as we want to change things, we're still living in this structure. And, we're just doing our best.
So are you leaning more into Row House being an e-com at this point?
No. I'm leaning into competing with the biggest and the best.
Okay.
Yeah.
But currently, right now, the best way to access your books is through e-commerce, correct?
Oh, no, we're going to be in every single bookstore. We're going to be in all the brick and mortars. I'm very excited about that. The Targets, the Walmarts. And our first title, The Altar Within by Juliet Diaz, is already, I think, up to 4,000 in pre-sales. Very excited about that. It's an extraordinary feat. So we are competing legitimately. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. And talk to me about the last year for you in terms of now getting this first book out. The peaks and valleys of being an entrepreneur in sort of
it's all a blur.
Yeah,
it's all a blur, Joe.
It's all a blur. But it's been a disruptive year, not just for your life, but for the life of publishing. What's the experience been like emotionally for you?
Oh my goodness! Wow. We are two middle-aged moms running a publishing house I'm running it from my converted garage, now my office. Kristen's out in Ojai, California. It's been beautiful. It's been stressful. It's been exhausting, but the response has been just beyond anything that I could have imagined. Who knew so many people were excited about books and what a publisher was doing? Obviously, so happy that people are embracing our message of equity and anti-racism, but also celebrating Black joy and celebrating disabled folks and queer issues. I'm a mother of a trans son, And it's just been incredible to have this supportive environment where people just love every single thing that we're doing. And like the people that count, right? Like I'm not talking about the publishing heads. I'm talking about, the people in our community who are going to buy these books. So it's been a long year. Fundraising was challenging. There were, countless tears, but far more joy. And, I owe that all to the community and of course my team, the people that are close to me.
Were there days, Rebekah, where you were like, why am I doing this?
Oh my gosh, I said it this morning. I said it this morning. I was on the phone with the head of our production team, Pauline Newworth, and I was telling her, like, thank God for you. Thank God for you and your team, because we had no idea what we were doing. No idea what we were getting into. But, we're like moms, we're women, we get the job done, and, praying to my ancestors, standing on the shoulders of giants, all of that. And yeah, every day I'm like, am I doing this? Is this real?
Do you have to, when you have those, how do you, like, what kind of validation do you kind of give? And I don't mean to like make this into a therapy session, but this is good for any entrepreneur, because it's like they all go through the shit, And so sometimes you need like a small victory. So what kind of small victories have you experienced that sort of kept it going? Because a lot of entrepreneurs, that's what it is. It's just like keep racking up singles and singles and singles, and eventually you hit a home run. But those singles do count. They add up.
They absolutely add up. And I'll tell you, it's like even seeing $1 come into Venmo and it, like, for real, like, I'm a mom from Michigan and this is all I can do. And I know it doesn't count for much, but I'm just cheering you on, and like, I'm offering my prayers. Like, it really matters. My to-do list, crossing things off my to-do list is just it's the most glorious process. And then obviously, we wake up in the morning and we think, why are we doing this? Does it matter? And is probably as unhealthy as this is. It's kind of like, all right, I'm going to give myself a minute to do this. And then I just got to get to work. So the work has been the therapy. The work has been the reward. I do love what I do, as cheesy as that is.
No, hey, you got to love what you do. And it's funny because you are, maybe this is going to be a weird phrase, but you're sort of like a meditation influencer. So do you,
I am.
Yeah. So I don't think that's the first time I've ever uttered that phrase, but do you get into the fact that, you know so much about meditation, you coach people, you help people along their journey. Do you sometimes get in your own head and be like, meditation's not going to do anything for me today. Maybe,
no.
No. Okay.
No, I am almost 44. I started my meditation practice when I was 15. I have meditated faithfully every single day since. It has literally saved my life. I inject it into or integrate it into every single thing that I do. I talk about it often. And for me, meditation is not about clearing my mind of all thoughts and, worries. It's really about sitting down and giving myself the space to focus on one thing or a couple things and to examine the reality of what is. And I think this is very helpful for entrepreneurs who love to tell themselves the worst case scenario always. It's like, all right, let's break this down. Is this true? What is actually happening in this moment? And that grounds me every day. Yeah.
And being the face of the company, it has some positives, but has some negatives. What sort of pros and cons have you experienced as you've launched this for you personally that have affected you one way or the other?
So to be really real, especially when we're talking about anti-racism, especially, me presenting myself as a woman of color, people will look at me as someone who is ambiguous and gets access to a lot of spaces, navigates, white spaces very easily because of, my palatability. I have very light skin. My hair is, it's like slightly curly, wavy. I can be in, I go to Israel, everyone thinks I'm Israeli. I go to, I go to Puerto Rico, people start speaking Spanish to me. So that affords me a lot of privilege, and people have, questioned whether I'm the person to be doing this, or to represent this. And that's why it's so important that, I have this beautiful panel of authors, the Faith Investors, our publishing council in Trudy LeBron, Juliette Diaz, Maisha T. Hill, and Ebony Janice Moore. These are authors, these are women of color who are also there to provide me and the rest of my team accountability in the types of topics that we're tackling. Because, my experience is my experience. I'm a biracial woman with a ton of privilege. So having my face out there is challenging.
Yeah.
Having, because that's a sore point for me personally, but I got to do it. Who's going to do it, right?
Yeah.
So,
and also being a front-facing executive and leader, you have to do a lot of interviews like this one. And I found one from Yoga Journal, and I love the first sentence.
Oh, no.
And I'm not sure if it embarrassed your family or not, but when Rebekah Borucki was 15, she shoplifted a copy from a book from a used bookshop.
Yeah,
Which your
I did.
family were like, Rebekah,
they know.
But were they embarrassed that was like the lead in the story?
No, I mean, that's the story, right?
Yeah.
That's the story. My I guess initiation into my spiritual practice was shoplifting a book because I was 15 and I didn't have the money, and like that's what I did. And I probably should have known better. I grew up in the church, but that's what I needed at the moment. I'm a high school dropout. That is something that I talk about often because I went to work. I had a learning disability that was unrecognized. I had fantastic grades, but I was just struggling. It was just way too hard, and I had to make money. I was out on my own at 17, and so this is all part of it. And I hope that it not only humanizes me and allows me to become relatable and connected to the people I want to be connected to, but it also just shows people the possibility of greatness or success when society is telling you that's just not for you. Like, I don't have an MBA. It's not going to happen. For now, why would I do it now? But I have this really beautiful, successful, community-based publishing house, and I think I'm smart.
Yeah. I think you're smart. I don't know if that means anything, but I think you are. Let's wrapping up. Let's talk about the future. Can you see a world where you have a major African-American or queer author who's maybe has a deal with a giant company like a Simon Schuster, Random House, something like that? For example, let's say Colson Whitehead says, you know what? I don't want to sign a big deal. I want to go to Row House. Can you see that in the future?
Of course. First of all, and again, I don't know how this is going to come off, but we're talking about Black and brown people here, right? Like, we're talking about people that have been marginalized and that are socialized and conditioned through their culture to help each other out, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Again, I am the descendant of enslaved Africans. So by virtue of me walking this earth, like, someone had to get together and like work really hard for our survival. So absolutely. Juliet Diaz, she is a Cuban American. She was with Hay House, our former publisher. She left in solidarity with me. She sells, I don't know, she sells a lot of books. She sells a lot of books. And she's like, we didn't have a name. We didn't, Row House wasn't a thing. She didn't know what the deal was going to be, but she's like, I'm with you. Maisha T. Hill has 700,000 followers on Instagram with Check Your Privilege. She's like, I'm in. Like Ebony Janice Moore, another one, just a powerhouse. Like, I'm in. Like, of course that's in our near future.
Wow. That's awesome. I love that. That's great. And lastly, Shirley Chisholm famously said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. It feels like that's sort of like Rebekah's way of life. Am I correct?
I say that we flipped their table and we're sitting at the ones our ancestors built.
All right. I'll take that. Her name is Rebekah Borucki. She is the president at Row House Publishing. Rebekah, thanks so much for the time. I cannot wait to see what you and your team do next.
Thank you so much.
You are very welcome. Find out more about Row House at rowhousepublishing.com. And that's it for this edition of the Forbes Books Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you take a second to subscribe so you automatically get my new shows when they drop. Also, if you have a minute, I would love if you left us a review so more amazing entrepreneurs like yourself can discover the show. And please don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.